It's 2 p.m. EST. Yeah. It's not early bird, Christina, but for me, it really is. It really is.
It still is.
8 a.m. is like the crack of dawn for me. My reps used to joke at Chorus. They're like, just don't talk to Beck before noon. Like, it's just not worth it for you or her. Like, the lift
Same
is
here.
too much.
Same here.
Should have told us. Could have.
For body, soul, spirit, emotionally, it's just not worth the content that you're going to get out. Someone say, hey, oh, you said, hey, Willie?
Yeah. Willie from Demmanuel.
Mind immediately went to Willie Nelson. I'm not going to lie. There's Texas coming out in me.
Yeah, Texas, LA.
Awesome.
That's a folks from NOLA.
I'm from Jellyvision. Jordan, I have heard so much about Jellyvision. I know someone who used to work there. That is very, oh, Jordan said cool. Trinity, you want to kick us off? Should I go ahead and shoot the deck?
Yep.
I think interestingly about the locations, no one from San Francisco yet. I think that is similar.
Everyone's still in bed.
everyone moved out. So it's just we are still left.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh.
Oops.
Wait, Beck, did you just chatted by yourself? Becca from San Francisco. Hey, Stas. All right, I'll kick this off because I know we have a lot of content to share and we want to go share as much as possible today. So hi, everyone. I'm Trinity from UserGems and I'll be the facilitator today. So for today's session, we'll go really deep into how to reach out to customers who switched jobs to a new company. So these are your hottest of leads because they already know your product. So these leads can have a huge impact on your pipeline. And Beck will share the how. So how to contact them to maximize the chance of turning every email into a meeting. And at the very end, Christian, our other panelists you see on the screen, will also share one slide that you can forward to your ops team if you want this display completely automated in your Salesforce instead of you manually searching for these job change leads yourself. All right, before we kick off, a bit of housekeeping. By now, you all know how these webinars work. So feel free to use the chat box for discussions, questions. I'll try to surface these up during the session. You can also submit the questions in the Q&A box below. And yes, this session is recorded and slides will be available afterward. I'll email these to you guys. You can also find it on our UserGems website. Okay, so let's get to it. Beck Holland needs no introduction. If you're in SaaS and on LinkedIn, you've heard about Beck, you've seen her content, and in our case at UserGems, we've applied many of her techniques in our sales and marketing emails and sequences. So that's why even though we don't do a lot of webinars, but when we do, it's always with Beck Holland. So Beck, take it away.
Someone said the other day, they're like, Beck, you don't share any of your own stuff, but they've been seeing the UserGems promo from a webinar we did like a year. And I'm like, I'm best friends with UserGems. I don't think it's a secret to anyone on social. Like our tails kind of sticking out. Well, hi, everyone. Nice to meet you on the line. My name's Beck. And I wanted to go into, I like how Trinity said, we're going to go into the how today. So I'm not very, full disclosure, good at the why at the high level, but we're going to go mid-level down to low level of what are all the templates that you would send? In what case scenario would you send these? What are the follow-up templates if you don't get a response? So we're going to really unpack the how from each one of these plays. But from a high level, I think that this is a really important play. And from what I had heard before I knew UserGems existed, I had heard probably every VP of sales that I talked to talk about this play of people are churning, they were users, but no, the big struggle was always how do you operationalize it? How do you operationalize it? How do you operationalize it? And how do you make it quick and easy? Because no one can just sit on LinkedIn all day and figure out, okay, there's a user that goes to another company, but it's insatiably valuable. If nothing else, I think that the average rate is 1.5 years, 2 years job change within tech. And so we have our books swapping companies, every 6 months or a year. And so it's not all about quote unquote new pipeline, no one's new essentially. So the sheer volume is what makes me excited about this, but we're going to dig in here. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a story and then we can go into some of the playbooks. But when I, let me go ahead and broadcast. Can everyone see my screen here? So
Yes.
whenever how this kind of came about, or my love and affection for UserGems, put the team aside, who is wonderful, by the way. How it came about was I was at a company, a sales tech company, and I remember I was had just started with the team, and they really, really wanted pipeline. Like I was 3 or 4 days deep. They said, like, how do we 2x, 3x, 4x our pipeline? I'm like, okay, calm down. Like, I don't even know where the bathroom is quite yet. But one play that the AEs were consistently coming up with and saying, they were like, you just need to find the accounts that we've sold into, you know, they were instructing the SDRs at this point. And again, I'm new onboarding, just getting to know the team. They're like, find the accounts, you know, that we've sold into. And when people move roles, just find them on LinkedIn. And I just remembered the SDRs being like, how do we do that? That's a great play, but like, how do we do that? And how do we automate it? So half of this is going to come down to the session today is going to come down to the how. And the other very important piece is how do you automate all of that and systematize it and do it in real time so that all of the list building and list cleaning, like your users essentially don't have to be on social media tracking everyone, you know, as if they could, but they don't have to do that and sit around and track everyone. So we're going to go into a lot of the how. Full disclosure, we're going to be going into 3 playbooks over the course of 3 webinars when it comes to executive change out. So the first one is customers who move to another company. So this is, let's use Twilio and Drift in this example of if I'm trying to sell Drift and someone at Twilio, you know, bought Drift and used Drift, and then they moved on to, let's say, Seismic, for instance, you know, and I want to sell into Seismic. So that's the first playbook. The second playbook and second webinar is going to be new buyers who joined your target account. So again, I'm trying to sell into Seismic, and this would just be anyone who came in at Seismic, whether they had used me or not. And then the third case scenario is going to be internal role changes. So this is going to be if I'm trying to sell into Seismic and I had someone who is using Drift, you know, and then they changed into another role that could use Drift where I can cross sell into that role. So all 3 case scenarios are very, very important. You know, tech churn is higher than ever. It feels like every time I go to LinkedIn, I'm seeing 15 new job updates. So we're going to do those over the course of 3 webinars. But for this webinar, we're going to focus in on customers who have used your product and have moved on to another company, and the plays that you can do behind that. So full disclosure, I love it when this is interactive. So please, please, please don't make me beg. Go into the chat, ask questions all along the way. Trinity's going to be monitoring all of the questions and bubbling some up to the top, and we're going to do a Q&A at the end. But I crave your questions, so please put them in the chat, you know, as we go along here, whenever they pop up in your brain, and we'll try to get to all of them.
Yeah, we actually got the first question from, I'm sorry if I butcher your name, Oscar, and also Neil from Gemma Software submitted this question as well, is if it's a new hire, but we don't necessarily work with them before, what would be the right time to reach them, considering that a lot of people are already bombarding them?
Yeah.
Back to Christian.
Oh yeah, Christian, you want to handle it?
Yeah, I think the interesting part about this question is actually it could fall into bucket 1 and 2 of these playbooks, because if we never work with them, that's actually what we cover in the second part. But generally about timing, there's this really interesting statistic that says new decision makers spend 70% of their budget in the first 100 days. And that's similar to the story Beck said. Like if you're a decision maker, you arrive at the company, you evaluate the situation once you found the bathroom, and then you figure out what tools, processes, people do you need. So it's really good to get in touch early, not be too salesy right at the beginning as they're evaluating, but second month is right the time where you want to be top of mind there. And I think Beck will cover this, how to best first be top of mind and then sell to them.
Yeah, so this is going to be an annoying answer, Oscar, but that is webinar 2. That is webinar 2, where we're going to go in really deep, but to Christian's point, it's about timing. Most of this is about timing, lead routing, rules of automation. I'm almost less interested that you guys deploy the tactical in the exact way that I would prescribe. I would say what's most important is that you're getting to these decision makers very, very quickly, early, because like Christian said, when I came in as a, as a leader into the 4 different orgs that I walked into, Christian's right. The first thing I was thinking about is I'm evaluating the current state of the org. I'm like, who are my team members? Who are the A players? Who are the B players and C players? What does the process look like? What does the data tell me, from a KPI perspective? Like, where are the problems? What are the fires, immediate fires? And how can I solve for those using tech, people, and process? So usually decision makers are thinking through that for the first, 30 days of like, okay, I want to really get a good grasp of what is going on at the current state org. And month 2, they're putting together a process plan in tech, and month 3, they're starting to deploy it, is usually the cadence that I've seen. So it's going to come down to timing, but we're going to go into that really deeply in webinar 2. So the playbook today, this is going to be for people who have used you. So again, the example is I'm at Drift. I had Twilio as a customer, and I had a decision maker at Twilio that really liked us, and then they moved on to Seismic in this case scenario. So those are the companies we're going to use today. There are 3 different playbooks. Number 1 is when they're within your buyer persona. So let's say you sell into VPs of sales, for instance, and they were a VP of sales at Twilio, and then they changed to Seismic, and they're also a VP of sales there. So they're within your buyer persona of who you want to sell into. The second playbook we're going to go through is when they aren't within buyer persona, meaning the level of the buyer persona you want to sell into. So as people change orgs within segment, sometimes this sounds bad, but sometimes a VP at an SMB company can be a manager, at an enterprise company. So it depends on the type of org that they went into. And I've seen a number of changes just within the last couple of weeks for people that I'm talking to where that exact thing happens. Of like most enterprise companies are going off of like a standard amount of criteria. Like I know at Google, for instance, you cannot be promoted unless you hit these certain criteria, milestones, et cetera. And so most enterprise orgs, they're ranking off of that, not off of the good juju feel and ideas, et cetera. So the second playbook is going to be when they aren't at the right level of buyer persona that you sell into, and what's the play there, because it's more of a bottom-up approach. And then the third playbook we're going to go into is when they aren't within the buyer persona in terms of discipline. So let's say they pivoted from, sales to sales enablement, for instance, and you don't sell into sales enablement. What would the play be there? So I'm going to get through as much as I can. The slides are going to be there for you. So I'm going to touch on a lot of concepts, typical Beck fashion of like, I'm going to try and get through as much as I can, but the rest of the tactical stuff is going to be within the deck that you'll get afterwards. So let's start off. The first one is when they are within buyer persona. So this is ideal case scenario of, they were VP of sales at Twilio, then took the role at Seismic, and they're also a VP of sales. So this is the playbook in terms of steps. There are 13 steps that I am typically following, and it's a mix of cold call, email, and the option of direct mail. So I think at the hinge of most of this, it's really an expansion cell almost to a degree, because this is someone that has used your product before. So within expansion selling and the executive churn play, most of this comes down to whether we want to believe it or not, whether you made them happy at the first company. So if I used, Drift, for instance, sorry, Drift, if you're on the line, if I'm using Drift and I wasn't happy with them at Twilio, and then I go over to Seismic, I in no case scenario would recommend them. I wouldn't make that mistake twice. So I think that, our deployment, it's going to come down a lot to that. But let's say, for instance, let's take as a given that they're always happy, that they're happy, that they used our product. So the first step that I would take is you want to have the mindset of, I want to be a value add to this person, and I want to focus on value at the beginning as opposed to trying to sell right off the bat. So we don't like to be used. We don't like to be sold to. We don't like to have a relationship with anyone, whatever that relationship may be, personal or professional, where we feel like the person is only showing up whenever it's convenient for them, when there's something that's in it for them. So we're going to apply that learning here. So the first thing that I would be doing is thinking about how can I add value to this person right out of the gate, you know, in their new role, and how can I give them the taste, feel, and flavor if I haven't at their previous company before, at the new company at Seismic, that I am here, I'm an advocate, I'm in their corner, I care about them regardless of, you know, whether they buy us or not. So the first way to do that is you can send over a direct mail package. So I can tell you that the wonderful team at Ambition, whenever I started Flip the Script, their team sent over like a big package of champagne and all these different things for starting the company. And that has stuck in my mind. They're an amazing team if you haven't checked them out, but they sent over this package and it stuck in my mind whenever I was starting this business of like, whoa, they care about me, you know, and they're rooting for me regardless of whether, you know, I'm not a buyer in this case scenario, I'm a one-person org, but they care about me enough to send over that package. So the first step that I would think about is, can I send them some level of direct mail? You know, if you have a platform for this or not, a great option is Sendozo does this, where you can do it at scale. But if not, then I would just go buy a package and send it to them and say, hey, I'm really excited for you in your new role. So that's on day 0, and I wouldn't ask for anything. The second step is a LinkedIn level of research of the new company. You want to get to know the new company that you're selling into. And I would send on day 1 a congrats email along with the direct mail package, basically saying like, hey, you know, we're going to go into the text later, but congratulating them for their new role. Day 15, we're going to kick it out quite a bit in terms of timing because we don't want to look a fox in the hen house. But day 15, we're going to go into our first prospecting email, a couple of cold calls right after that. Day 22, we're going to go into a prospecting email, reply to the first prospecting email. We're going to go into a cold call after that. And then day 27, we're going to go into a value add strictly email. Several cold calls after that. Keep in mind, these cold calls, I would only leave 2 voicemails. So they shouldn't even know it was you, you know, until you actually pick up. So you want to think of, this is probably a bad example and so we're exposing of like, you're calling the guy, you want to get a hold of the guy, but you don't leave a voicemail because you don't want him to know that you called 28 times. So like you're only going to have 2 voicemails on record for this sequence, and then you're going to do a semi breakup email at the end. So this is just an overlay of the structure. Normally my sequences are 16 steps over 21 business days for cold prospecting. So you'll take a notice that this is only 13 steps. It is more heavily weighted on adding value because, again, you don't have to pitch to this person. They know you, they used you, and hypothetically, if you delivered a lot of value, it should be a no-brainer to them to involve you. So you want to come off, you want to slow your roll, you know, come off non-sleazy, non-salesperson, adding value, sending over content, and we're going to go into what those emails look like. But the approaches for this quote unquote executive churn case scenario is you want to be very value driven, you know, light on your pitch and just be there in the background for them to use you. The second point.
There's another question that came in. So Cynthia asked, I've been hearing that the breakup email is dead. Do you disagree?
I severely disagree. The breakup email, how 99.9% of people are deploying it is absolutely, it should never have been alive. Not only is it dead, but different topic for a different time. I can send you over a session where I go into breakup email specifically. A couple of low-hanging fruit of breakup emails that are bad that I see is associating the blame of them not responding to them instead of you for sending a bad email, assuming that they're not the right person because they didn't send you an email is a big no-no. Not actually walking away after you quote unquote break up with them, you know, playing the victim card of like, well, I've sent you 15 emails and you just couldn't seem to respond, and making them the victim or the villain and you the victim in the situation are a couple of low-hanging fruit. But the breakup email and all of my cadences is actually the strongest performer. So we're going to go a little into the breakup email today, for this sequence, but that's a great question. I think how 99.9% of breakup emails are written. Yes, I do believe, I believe they're dead. But yeah, we can go into the text a little bit later, but great question.
We have another question from Robin. Sorry, Beck.
No,
what would you say are the key differences in a prospecting versus value email? I mean, since you always want to add value.
Yeah, so a value email, how I'm defining it is it's value only and there's no ask. So we'll go into the text of that, but of how it's a great point. You're adding value at each step of the gate. And you'll see a lot of the tactic and technique in most of the emails that I send. But a value email, how I'm from a nomenclature perspective, coining it a value email is it's value only, and you say no need to respond, and you don't ask for anything. So that's why I'm coining it that. So playbook number 2 is that we're going to go into is when they aren't within buyer persona. So again, they were using Drift at Twilio. They went to Seismic. They were VP of sales at Twilio, and they aren't within buyer persona at Seismic in terms of level. So they went from a VP to, let's say, a frontline manager, and you typically want to sell to head of, or above. I've even seen VPs go down to individual contributor level. So it depends on the organization. So the second playbook we're going to focus in on is when they aren't within the right buyer persona in terms of level. So this is going to be, the play is going to be similar, but the ask is going to be different. So in this case scenario, you're trying to essentially multi-thread using, quote unquote, using the first buyer, but you're trying to get a joint meeting. Brigham Young did a study on the quickest ways to break trust with someone in general, irrevocably break trust. And the number one way to do it is not lying to them, not delivering on promises, but circumventing them and leaving them out is the quickest way to blow eternal trust with anyone that you're talking to, because it's premeditated. So we're in this case scenario going to not only involve, this person in the multi-threaded, groundswell, quote unquote, groundswell up play, but we're going to ask that they be in that first meeting. So you'll notice that the play is very, very similar in terms of structure, but the language is going to shift in terms of the ask, because in this play, we're going to go for in the prospecting email, and the ask is going to go for a joint meeting with their leader who you want to involve. I saw a lot of individual contributors on the line whenever you guys were giving roles, and this is going to be a play where a lot of times individual contributors are forced to, especially from the SDR perspective, to not involve at all someone who's too, quote unquote, low down the channel. And so this is going to be a play to get that decision maker involved, especially from a comp perspective, so that your comp and your AEs will take the meeting, because sometimes we're a bit short-sighted and we say decision maker or bust, and so this will be a good play to get the quote unquote right person in the room with the use case and internal case study of the person that you're prospecting into likes your tech, likes you, knows you, et cetera, and wants to recommend you. So I can't stress enough that the efficacy of these plays or expansion selling in general or executive churn in general is based on how happy you made them at the first org. So, renewal sell, 7 to 8 months, start quote unquote renewal selling by adding value 7 to 8 months before the renewal comes up. You don't want to pop your head in November and start sending muffin baskets. Third play that we're going to go into from a structure perspective and template perspective is going to be when they aren't within the right buyer persona in terms of discipline. So let's assume, in this case scenario, they were a VP of sales at Twilio, and then they went on to Seismic, and they transferred over to a VP of sales enablement. So different buyer persona in terms of the discipline that they're in. And so we're going to go into the play for that. And again, it's going to be a very similar to the first two sequences in terms of structure, but your ask is going to delta again. So your ask is going to go from, in the first case scenario, you want to be bought, they're the decision maker. The second case scenario, you want to multi-thread and go groundswell up because they're not the right role. In this case scenario, your ask is going to be to go for a referral. is to go for a referral from the VP of Sales Enablement, which is them, into the VP of Sales that is at the new org. So again, it's going to be very similar in terms of structure, a direct mail, and this is optional, step on the beginning, you know, research on who the new company is, you congratulating them, and then going after the prospecting email, but the CTA is going to be different. I can't tell you enough how many, percentage-wise, how many emails that I sent or read from a, you know, when I'm quote unquote correcting emails. And one of the main things that I've seen in these emails that is preventing these reps from being effective is the ask isn't clear. Like, it's bizarre. The CTA isn't clear of what they actually want. You know, a great example is like, hi Trinity, I noticed you downloaded content. Yeah. Do you have any questions? No. All right, see ya. It's like the ask was that you had a meeting, but you need to be very, very always strike the balance of being direct, but being polite. They don't need to leave the interaction confused on what you want, but they also don't need to leave the interaction thinking that if you don't get what you want, you're going to turn into an animal. So, you know, I'd always implore people to be direct in their ask of like iron fist in a velvet glove, be direct in what you ask, you know, but soften that with a push-pull, you know, instance or saying either way, you know, I'm excited for you, et cetera. So we're going to go into the text now. But I'd say you need to, if you're on the line and you do me a favor, study the Bliss Point in food and in nutrition. The Bliss Point is a physical point where chefs study how salty is a food, how sweet is a food, and how rich is a food. And at a certain point of balance, it drives addiction to a product, to a food, even when you're full. So like peanut butter, Nutella, it's the perfect amount of sweet, salty, and richness to where you keep craving more. So we want to deploy that same principle in our outreach with being very direct with our ask, but being polite in the way that we do it and respectful in the way that we do it to optimize responses. So let's first go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Before we get into the emails, so Adam asked, what are the reply rates on this sequence? I guess one of the three or the typical job change sequences. I don't know if Christian,
yeah,
either of you can take.
So I have some data from our customers, and what we consistently hear is that obviously that the response rates are better than any other sequence. And typically we see about 5x the response rate from a typical sequence. So if you're typically seeing somewhere in the range of like 4 to 6%, and I feel like it's going down during COVID, then you can expect somewhere in 20, 30% for the sequence to past users and past champions.
Yeah, and I'll add, like at UserGems, we also do our own UserGems for UserGems. So I just looked at our outreach sequences, and it's about 7. The lowest one for the job change is 17, and the highest one's 30%. And I think we did a webinar with Bright Talk, and they share similar percentage.
Yeah, which is a bizarrely high response rate. Very high response rate from what I have seen. So so let's go into the how here. Thanks for that data point, Christian. So as far as the how, the first is going to be a congratulations email. And I'm going to give you kind of the structure of this email. And again, all of this structure is going to be within the deck that you can check out afterwards. But the first line I would say is you just want to congratulate them and give them some kind of compliment. Hit the dopamine button, you know, say like, hey, you know, if you believe it, be genuine. But like, I always thought that you'd be a great addition to any team, and congrats on the new job change. And you just want to congratulate them for the shift in role. The second one is you just want to add a piece of value. So this is not a quote unquote value email, but this is where we're going to add value. And where I would focus is adding value on where they're at. You want to think like the buyer, where they're at in terms of, you know, their role. Most of my material is based off of what would work on me, right? So I'm trying to think through how would this feel if I were to be the one receiving it. So I would focus on a good low hanging fruit could be, you know, that you focus on, you know, onboarding of like, the first 90 days of onboarding and what you need, the decisions that you need to be making and the questions you need to be asking, or something that would help them ramp, in terms of their role. So if you just go to Google and you Google like tips for VPs of sales, onboarding, you'll get a number of articles, and they're actually usually really good. So I would just find some piece of article, podcast, ebook, etc., and I would think through where they're at in terms of what is happening to them from an emotional perspective. I just onboarded at a company. I want to add value to that organization quickly. I want to make an impression on that organization, not just from an emotional view, but from a numbers perspective. So how do I enable this person through content, to do just that? So I'd be thinking through what are the milestones that they would be wanting to hit within their role, and how can I send over some piece of content that would help bridge the gap for them quickly. So it's no surprise, I've changed orgs a number of times in my career. I did 2 MarTech companies, 2 sales tech companies that actually were competitors. And in each case scenario, whenever I was onboarding, I knew that within the first 90 days, 180 at max, I needed to make a strong delta in terms of their numbers. Their numbers needed to be 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x, 6x, 7x, whatever, what they were before I joined on. So before you're drinking the champagne at a new role, you're thinking like, okay, hugs for the champagne, but like I haven't made an impact yet. So most people are thinking through that of what are the symptoms of effectively running a program, and how can I make a change from whenever I came in, this needs to be a better org, to 15, 20%, 30%, et cetera, because of my level of impact, especially if I'm a decision maker. So I would, implore like finding some piece of value, whether this is an article, podcast, low lift to them, and I would digest it for them in terms of like, give them a point. Like, hey, I really liked this article on blank, especially point number blank where they go into blank. So you kind of give them a nugget that they don't have to go through the entire thing, and they have one place to look.
Yeah, and I want to quickly shout out there for Trinity, because she's running our podcast with exactly that topic, like the first 100 days of like any new situation, becoming a CMO, becoming a VP, or joining a completely new role. So maybe that link is just a link to the podcast on UserGems.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, but like you can find anything, honestly, and just say like, hey, here's podcast, article. That's a great low-hanging fruit of like, from an onboarding view, how can I say something to this person that has never been said that could be very helpful? That's a question that they're thinking, looking to answer. And then I would, typical Beck fashion, I would push-pull technique at the end. You want to be, direct in your ask if you have one. In this case, we don't. And then you want to push-pull, near the end, which means that you want to push for, some kind of meeting or CTA. And then you want to pull back by communicating that either way, either way you're a fan of their team, either way you're rooting for them, either way, et cetera, et cetera. And so in this case scenario, I would say either way, I'm impressed by the jump. I'm excited to watch you kill it, and let me know if I can be of any help along the way. So you want to be seen as a resource and an advocate and someone who's in their corner. Salespeople who are in your corner sell more effectively than anything I've seen. So they need to be sure that you will, tell them the truth, downsell in the right case scenarios, tell them what they don't need along the way, a couple low-hanging fruit, but you want them to see you, and you should be, kind of catch me if I can style. Fake it till you make it, baby. Like, just start adding value and viewing them as like, this is the way I quote unquote renewal sell. And somewhere along the way, you'll start to, I feel like, genuinely adopt that mindset. So you want to communicate to them through a push-pull of like, either way, let me know if I can be of any help, and I'm impressed by the jump. Most people will respond to this email because they know what you want. And they're like, hey, cool, I was actually thinking about bringing in Drift, except like in my experience, most people will respond to this congrats email because they can read between the lines, even if you aren't asking for anything. So that's email 1. Email 2, wow, I'm rolling on time. I got about 10 minutes. Email 2 is your first prospecting email. Again, that's going to be at day 15, business day 15. And I would personalize by finding something that they're doing recently. If you want more on this, if you go to flipthescript.co, I go very, very lengthy into personalization at scale. But I'd be thinking through what are the types of articles they're posting, content they're engaging with, about me section, junk drawer, any kind of company level data, but you want to know what they're doing right now. So I would, one way that you can convey respect to someone and convey allyship is by knowing what's going on with them. Knowing what's going on with them in terms of what they're doing, what they're up to. It always builds a lot of rapport with me whenever I talk to someone, they're like, oh, I liked this post that you said the other day. And we're almost picking up the conversation from a point where I'm at. And I don't have to catch them up of something that just happened. So this is a sign of respect, is attention. In a lot of case scenarios. So you want to know what's going on with them. And the first prospecting email, I would say the first line, you want to do a premise of personalization. I saw you, and this can be a company level move. It could be a, article that they've just recently written, or some kind of content they're engaging with. A lot of times when someone's changing roles, they're engaging with the new company on social media. They're thanking the old company in a Grammy award-winning speech, like all the people that, and on a side note, the closed one channel is always like, I want to thank my mom and thank the solutions engineer. Like you'll see those posts on LinkedIn where they're thanking their whole team, and then they're engaging with the new company. So I would say some kind of premise of personalization that you are communicating to them, that you know what's going on with them or their company, and then you could say, I couldn't stop thinking about, pardon the cheesy interruption, but I couldn't stop thinking about when you were at Twilio and you used Drift to blank. That's your personalization, is how did they use your product in their previous role, to drive some level of outcome. And I would use very heavily in this classic role diffusion. I don't have time to go into it, but essentially classic role diffusion is where you call out, it's a pattern interrupt, where you call out something that is seen as sleazy, advancing, agenda driven, beforehand. So it makes the buyer, prospect, whoever it is, feel more comfortable that you have self-awareness of what you're doing. So in this case scenario, I would say, not to be the typical rep that comes around only when there might be another sale, but, I have an idea on how you can do the exact same thing you did at Twilio at Seismic by blank. So you want to customize, how did they use your context is respect to someone of their buyer journey. And it's something that 100% of companies don't do. Of like, hey, you demoed, you said this, now we're here. Like that is respect to someone, of like couching for them, what has happened. So I'd say like, hey, not to be the typical rep who's coming around and trying to go for a second sale, but, I was thinking about how you used Drift at Twilio to do this. And I have an idea on how you could use it at Seismic to do this, and make that personalized to how you would envision them using it at Seismic. So it sounds crazy, but like your buyer, like think about your buyer, and how would they use that in their new role, new industry, new company, etc. And I would ask for, in terms of the CTA, one time to unpack the idea and make it company specific. I have an idea on how you could leverage that at Seismic. I know that you had 15 reps, at Twilio. Now you have 50 reps across multiple international geos, on how you could use it to X, Y, and Z, based on the previous usage that they had at the previous company. So essentially in this case scenario, normally in personalization, I would say find some article that they wrote, or, comment that they engage with, but you already know this person. So the personalization is going to come down to company level context at this point, of like, you don't need the pattern interrupt necessarily gimmick of saying like, I noticed that you ran track. Like you already know this person. And if you're an effective sales rep, you know them well. You should be on a texting basis with this person if they're your decision maker at a marquee deal, for sure. If you're not, then report back to square one. How can I fix that hemorrhage, for future users? But I would say your context, your personalization is how did they use it at in their previous role, And how do you envision them using it in the next role? And I'd say they need to be different. If they're not different, then you haven't personalized. So I work with too many orgs where they say like, oh yeah, we have several buyer personas, VP of sales enablement, VP of sales ops, VP of sales and SDR. I'm like, cool. Okay, let's think through these value props. And I'm like, view it as the sales enablement leader. They come out with a value prop. Then I'm like, okay, view it as a sales leader. And they're like, it's basically the same thing. I'm like, it shouldn't be. They're completely different roles. They're completely different roles. So I would say couch it to them in their new company of how you'd envision them. Every single sale for you should feel like a boutique sale based on their needs and their objectives, where you're using your product to solve for something. That's exhausting from the mental infrastructure, but then these people are begging you to close, right? Because you've couched it for them so effectively. So I'd say that last line is you want to respect, at request for one time to talk to them very briefly. Again, you should already know them, about how you could envision that working at Seismic. And then you want to push pull near the end. Either way, at any rate, regardless, in any case, you should always have a line near the end. I appreciate the first time that you bought me. It's great to watch you kill it with the team so far, and I hope you're adapting, well with the new couple employees that you have on board. So you want to give them a flavor of, I'm still in your corner whether you buy or not, and I love that you gave me the first sale. Email 3, I know I'm going fast, but I only have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to get as far as I can here. Email 3, which is a reply to the first prospecting email. Very simple. Any thoughts? And add some value. I didn't love this email at the beginning, but outreach pushed me to do it, and it works really well. It's one of the highest performers. So I'm a data girl. I'm not an opinion girl. I'm an opinionated data girl. So I would use this, and I would make sure it's different value than the first piece of value that you sent over, whether that's medium, whether that's content of like podcasts. Go to Trinity's podcast. I like Christian. Trinity's podcast, webinar, a book list is really effective for people that I've been using that's been working really well recently, is like, a book list of things that they should be reading about, especially like a quote from one of the books is really effective, but you essentially just want to multi-thread, say any thoughts and add some content. The fourth email, and again, this is a lighter sequence in terms of your ask because they already know you. So I don't know if that's good or bad, meaning I would evaluate all my current deals regardless of whether I am an account executive, CSM, RM, AM, cross-sell, upsell, renewal, SDR. I would think through my current book for people who have bought me. And a great litmus test is if that person were in Times Square on the billboard telling their experience with you as a sales rep and as a company and as a tool, is that a good thing for you? Or a bad thing for you? Is it a good thing in terms of their experience, or is it a bad thing? And if it's a bad thing, I would try to understand why and solve for that. And the sooner, the better. And cross-selling, renewal, any kind of selling. But I can't stress enough, it's going to hinge off of their experience with you, in this case scenario at Twilio. The fourth email, to Oscar's point, is a value strictly email. And it's, hey, wanted to reach out because I thought of you when I heard this podcast the other day at minute 13:45 and thought, where they covered blank, thought you might want to take a listen. And I would instruct them, no need to respond. Just thought you might like blank as you're ramping in your new role. So this is an email where you've already asked them out, they haven't responded, and you just want to send over value in the meantime, and make it appear as it should be that you're in their corner either way, and you're after helping them. So this is the no need CTA. This releases the pressure, and it actually makes people respond more than they wouldn't. Is relieving the pressure and saying no need to respond. No need to buy, whether you use me or not, I would still suggest this kind of thing. It's that mindset whenever selling, but I would say no need to respond and just include some piece of value. And I would push pull near the end. In any case, I love you. Hope you're doing well, blah, blah, blah. And then the breakup email, I I can't remember the name of who asked about the breakup email, but if you would do me a favor, go to the webinar section on Flip the Script, and I cover breakup emails, and I go very deep on this concept. But the breakup email is essentially, you want to fall on your sword. The only thing that you cannot counter is no response, which is the most frequent outcome of our outreach, is no response. So you don't know how you want to pitch or how the situation is going unless someone talks to you. So this email is meant to tease out some narrative from them in a positive way, by essentially tripping in front of them, adding value, giving them relief that you think it's you, or you think it's valid, maybe why they're not reaching back out to you. You get the feeling, calling the elephant out in the room, and then walking out the door. I cannot stress how effective this technique is. I could give you, in that webinar, I go into 3 examples of CEOs of major organizations that I deployed it on 2 weeks previous to the webinar. And it's like clockwork. You send it over, 20 minutes later, you'll get a response from them, because they can't help from pick you up off the floor. So in this case scenario, I'd say, hey, I just wanted to make sure just wanted to check in one last time and make sure I haven't overstepped my bounds. Given you originally used us, in your new role at Seismic, where you're looking to drive X, Y, and Z, I originally thought it made sense to reach out, and you want to go elephant in the room. Maybe it's just me, but I'm getting the feeling now's just not the best time to connect. And I hope I didn't blow any rapport with you by going for the second sale. Most people are going to say, but Beck, I don't talk like this. And I'm like, yeah, well, that might be like, you want to call out that you're worried that essentially you might have blown rapport with them by being sleazy and reaching for the next branch. And this is going to be the keys to the kingdom in terms of getting someone to respond, calling them back whenever you messed up and telling them that, of calling out the elephant in the room of what's happening. It shatters out of child and parent ego state, which are very dangerous to be in when selling. And it gets you into adult ego state whenever you're just calling out what you think is happening. But I'd say something like this. Maybe it's me, but I'm getting the feeling now is not the best time to connect, and then you want to hard walk out the door. People do not like it when you walk out the door, if you're truly walking out. So you don't want to be the rep that's like, okay, I'm going to walk out now. I'm going to walk out. No, just walk out. In a very polite way. Think through how you walk out whenever you normally are truly doing it, and emulate that. So I'll quit bugging you now. Let me know if I can be of any help, with Seismic or any support in general along the way. Regardless, I'm so excited for you, and can't wait to see what you do with the program moving forward. And I would say the 2 most effective words in this breakup email, and then I'm going to transition over to Christian. You're going to have to read the rest of the slides. I went too long, but read the rest of the slides for the other 2 plays. But the 2 most effective words in a breakup email are in your signature. And from my perspective, take care, because it communicates to them, no, I'm really walking out. So I'd say take care in your signature of, you want to convey to them, you have respect. You hope that you aren't the sales rep who went for the second branch and didn't effectively take care of the first. Add value, add articles, add podcasts. You're excited for them, and then you want to walk out the door. And so this should be your highest in any cadence, but certainly in this one. Any sequence, this should be your highest response. Now, they're going to give you a level of narrative of what they're thinking. They're not going to respond and say, how's Thursday at 2? Usually, they're going to say some kind of context of, no, it's not just you. It's not you. It's just, and then they're going to give you some level of context. And I would listen to them and I would solve for it, and pattern interrupting and get behind the objection. But this is really meant to tease some response out of them so you can get a dialogue going. So these other 2 plays, when they're not within buyer persona and when they, in terms of role or discipline, unfortunately don't have time to go into, but they're very similar. The high level, and then Christian, you can take it away. High level for if they're not within the right level of role, the only thing that's going to change is the prospecting email for email number 2 is that your CTA is going to be different. you want to request that the person sets a meeting up with their boss to unpack the idea that you have about how they could be used at Seismic. And they're an internal case study reference point that's really strong because it's internal at this point. And then when they're not within the right discipline, you want 5 things in this descending order from your buyer. The first one, the strongest case scenario is that they make an intro to the decision maker with UNCC. Second is that they write an email themselves that you get to ghostwrite. Third is that you don't get to ghostwrite it, but they still send it. If you have sold effectively to them within your first org, then you should be in one of these 3 buckets. If they're not willing to do one of these 3, then like you messed up. There are some plays after this. I go into this very extensively at Flip the Script on expansion selling, the 4 types of expansion selling and the playbook behind it if you want to see more. But I'd say if they're not comfortable enough to do one of these 3, or they send over an email on your behalf, you didn't add value the first time around. So I would triage and go back to my original sales playbook, deployment, et cetera, and figure out what the crap am I doing with my current customers that's not helping them be successful because this person wasn't enough. So I can't keep selling, if it didn't work. So Christian, take it away. A lot of this comes down to automation. So why don't you go into some automation, how to automate it?
Oh, before we pass to Christian, back there was a question from Robin, like, are you using LinkedIn messaging and InMail in the sequences as well?
InMail, no, because I should be connected to them already for this case scenario. Again, this is a current buyer. So I wouldn't in this case, because you should already be connected to them. I have omni-channeled to LinkedIn. Usually it's with the pattern interrupt of, I sent this to you over email, and then you can go into your message to them there. But I would be measuring like, did they open my email at their new company or did they not? And you want to give that level of context. That's a good question. Christian.
Yeah. No, and I think that specifically what you're talking about is if this is the buyer that I've already been in touch with, there could also be just the power users that I as a salesperson might have never been in touch. And then certainly I'm probably not connected on LinkedIn, then I can add the LinkedIn connection step. And some of the wording will be different if I didn't have the personal touch with them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but Beck, thank you so much. I know how good Beck is at this, and I'm blown away every single time. So thank you so much. And I'm sorry that I'm now taking over from Beck. I'll keep it very short. So we just at UserGems, we always get the question of how are we actually doing it? We call it the UT for UT program. And I just want to highlight or point out a few things, and that this is very much ops related. But in a sense, the main thing is making sure that if someone changes their job, that's a champion or a power user, someone that likes the product, that something happens when they change, like that someone follows up. And the way we do it, and like there are different ways to do it, like you can have a task being created, an email notification, a notification in Slack. You can put them directly into a sequence, which I'll go into detail in a second, or you put them into queues and reports that someone has to empty. So the main thing is make sure someone actions them. And the way this is done within UserGems is, so we have something called the process builder. Oh, wait, sorry, back one more. Yeah. And we have these scenarios. And for example, one scenario is they join an account with an open op. That's like high alert. We want to make sure the AE knows about this, immediately brings these people together. So we send a notification email to the AE, we create a task, just making sure that the AE knows about this. And then we put them into a campaign to track. The second scenario is that what Beck talked a lot about, which is this, they join a target account without an open up. And then we automatically put them into these sequences that we prepared based on Beck's input. So they're directly in the sequence. And then we create a task for the SDR, alerting them that they're now this email waiting for them. And that's when they do their research. That's when they adapt the email, the sequence. And that's when maybe they decide not to send it, but at least they make this decision actively. And then for us, even if they join an account that might not be our ideal customer, we still reach out to them, just congratulating them. Like in a sense, it's a relationship. You want to keep the relationship. So we congratulate them on the change and wishing them all the best and thanking them for being a customer at the previous company. all I want to say there. Yeah, and then like if you're now the huge fan of tracking champions and you might want to start this individually, we actually just launched a free tool that we call calendar tracking. So in this case, we track everyone you've been in a meeting with and alert you when they either joined a new company or got promoted. And all you have to do is connect your Google Calendar, we'll analyze all the meetings you ever had, and then notify you if they change. And that's really the one where I have these personal relationships. I know these people. I've been in one or several meetings. And that's where like, for example, if I do it, we're getting response rates of over 50% for these, because that's directly where I am the person that actually has the relationship. So if you want to try this out, it's free. It's currently in beta. So sign up, UserGems.com.
I'm going to ding in here. You'd have to be insane to not do this.
We did not
free
to say this. Yeah.
It's free. You'd have to be insane to not do this. Please, please, everyone, for the sake of your pipeline, go to the, and I'm not saying that for any, I get no split. So please, for the sake of your pipeline, go to this website, go to this URL and get it.
Yeah, so usergems.com/product/calendar, sign up there. There's one question about whether it's only for Google Calendar. Right now it is, but we're extending this for Microsoft as well. Actually, I just answered. For Outlook, within the next month, we're going to offer that as well.
It's amazing. Okay, so we got 3 minutes left, so we probably have time for 2 questions. Trinity?
Yeah, so Flo just sent a question, Flo Landa. A lot of companies have contracts with their clients that don't allow to share any client's info with third parties, including the names of the people who use the solution. In this situation, how has UserGems dealt with this?
Yeah, so back, do you want to answer this? No. Yeah, so in this case, it's actually, so for example, we often hear the question about GDPR, CCPA, specifically when it comes to California and Europe. And the answer is actually that if you have customer data, you actually need to make sure that it's up to date. That's actually part of GDPR. So by like sharing it with UserGems, we actually help you fulfill your GDPR compliance by telling you when these people left the company. So it's actually part of the GDPR requirements, and UserGems can help with this, or you do it manually.
I think we answered all the questions on the chat and in the Q&A box.
Awesome. We did it.
Wow.
I can't believe it. We made it.
I can't believe it either.
Thank you everyone for coming. I cannot implore you more. If you haven't checked out UserGems, I do not recommend tech often. I am recommending it in this case scenario. You go to UserGems, check out their tools. Absolutely amazing in terms of lead routing, ops. How do I operationalize this? How do I get these people to my SDR's queues so they don't have to spend hours and hours and hours of research on LinkedIn, doing it. So I couldn't recommend them and their team and product more. I hear this use case all the time. So, and if you're in a quote unquote groundswell role and you want this, then go get a meeting with your boss and do a joint. Just kidding. Thanks so much for having me, Trinity and Christian. It was an absolute blast.